Thanks for being here. Thanks for your great work. Really appreciate it. Yesterday, I was at the White House. We had a roundtable with President Trump and Secretary of Ag Brooke Rollins, and announced the $12 billion assistance, the bridge, for our farmers until we get to the enhancements in the one big beautiful bill that we made, which includes enhanced crop insurance and updated ARC PLC counter-cyclical safety net, which is going to make a big difference for our farmers, but we got to get there. And again, President Trump and Secretary Rollins stepped up and provided that bridge. That sends not only a really important message to our farmers, but it sends a really important message to China that they're not going to put pressure on us by going after our farmers. And the President and Secretary Bessent and USTR Trade Ambassador Jameson Greer are fighting for our farmers and ranchers and markets overseas. And we really appreciate that, and I want to thank you and make sure that people understand that you're the one that's fighting to make sure that these trade agreements are enforced and that we get better terms for our farmers and ranchers and our other exporters as well, and that you are all about getting a level playing field, whether it's the tariffs that we face or the non-tariff barriers put on to us. How about China devaluing their currency and all these things that you are out there fighting for us and for our exporters, for our farmers, for our ranchers, for our processors, for our manufacturers, for everybody. That's the fight you're fighting. And by the way, when I talked to Scott Bessent yesterday, he said you are a walking encyclopedia. So I'm glad to hear that, and I would have to agree with him on that.
Well, thanks. Next time I'm going to have you draft my opening remarks, Senator, and I'll just read them.
So I just want to make clear, we appreciate that you're out there fighting for us, and I think sometimes that isn't fully understood. Now, obviously, we want sales and we want them executed. When we look at, for example, China, and we're talking about 12 million metric tons, initially 12 million metric tons for this season, and this is the 25 crop year, right? And then it ramps up to the 25 million metric tons for the following crop year. Walk us through what the timing of the sales will be for soy with China, but then also kind of with these other countries. So I'm really talking about the execution now, because you're booking sales, but the key is the execution and the timing now. And give us both whatever specificity you can give us now, and then tell us how you can get us more so we can kind of deal with that uncertainty that some of our farmers are facing, and that helps us with markets as well.
Sure. So again, thank you, and I appreciate your support and the conversations we've had. It's always helpful. With China, it's 12 million metric tons through the rest of this growing season, right, which tends to end in February or March, kind of depending on those sales. And then it's 25 million per growing season for the next 3 years.
So that's an important point right there for our farm, right? If these get executed, say before the end of March, that 12 million metric tons, and then we're already into the next 25, that's like 37 million within not a whole lot more than a year, right?
That's right. Yes,
it's important for people to understand that.
Yes, that's exactly right. And then on top of that, as you mentioned, we've had commitments from other countries to buy, soybeans, but also corn and wheat and sorghum and other things. And we've already seen, the first shipment of certain row crops to Bangladesh that first we've seen it in years. We have Korea and Japan who've made these commitments. And so, we have our ag team who tracks all of these things. And if they're not done, then, we'll enforce. I will say more important, China aside, doing purchase agreements with China is important just because the way their economy works. But with these other countries, we want the purchase agreements, but we want structural, constant access so that the farmers and the ranchers can have kind of regular market access and establish the relationships that are going to give them that continuity and certainty you're looking for.
Yeah, 90% of the soybeans we export from North Dakota, for example, are IP, identity preserved, and they go to China. And those are long-standing relationships, so you're right on there. I want to bring up Brazil. We hear about beef and other things, but for example, Brazil is dumping sugar over quota into our market. They have forced sugar prices for our producers down 42%. 42%, okay? But if you go in the store, it's flat. Flat. Okay, so this is an example of where we need to enforce our agreement for our sugar producers, because once they wipe us out, then they can push it right back up. This is, anti-competitive trade dumping 101. So what can we do about that?
Well, as I was mentioning to the chairman, I see Brazil as a major competitor in the agricultural space.
Right on.
And they have a lot of practices in Brazil that undermine our farmers, whether it's in export markets or right in home. Sugar is famously managed trade, right? It's rarely free trade in sugar. We have programs in the U.S., quotas, et cetera, to manage that. I'm happy to look at a closer level. This is a little bit I haven't gone into details on the effect of Brazilian dumping here in this market, but we can work with USDA to see what we can do about controlling that flow.
The last thing I'd bring up, and again, I appreciate both the chairman and ranking member for setting this up, opportunity to talk to you about the important work you're doing in trade, and that is on the Food for Peace. So, as Chairman mentioned, we've worked to reform the program that was badly needed. We support for Food for Peace, but it needs to support U.S. national interests, which was not happening with USAID, and state needs to have a hand in that. We've worked the process through state as far as, how the food aid can and should go, Food for Peace and PL 42. And so now it should be over to ag. I guess the question is, are you involved in advancing that? And is that under your purview as well, or is that just something we need to continue to work with state and USDA on?
So I don't have a direct hand on it, but sometimes I get looped into these kinds of things. So, and we're happy to talk to you. I'm happy to help play an organizing role in the White House, talk to state and USDA to make sure we have concrete path forward on these things.
Well, we did two things. In Ag Approps, we set it up for a one-year review, which I think is helpful, and something that our chairman of this committee wanted to do. Gives us a one-year time frame to kind of work on it. I think one of the concerns is moving some of the existing aid for this year out while we're working on that reorganization. So I guess if you have any insight into that, or somebody on your staff does, we'd want to touch base with them.
We're happy to help.
Okay. Again, thank you for the very important work that you're doing.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Mr. Ranking Member.